Welcome to the Experts Exchange Tech News Podcast. I'm your host, Gary Weil. This week, we're talking about Google Hangouts. And a bit later in the show, we'll hear from Gopi Kallyil, who is the Chief Evangelist for Google Social. Taking a seat this week in our rotating co-host chair is one of our web designers, Dave Kelly.
Hey, Gary.
Thanks for joining us today, Dave.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about what the EE front-end design team does.
Well, it's kind of cool because we're sort of a combination of design and front-end development. We don't all necessarily do both. We can. I think everybody over there can. Mm-hmm. We don't necessarily all get the opportunity to do it all the time. But
what do you mostly focus on?
I'm usually just doing development through our in-house CMS and actually putting pages together for the site and implementing any new functionality that we've come up with, and things like that. We're kind of where the rubber meets the road in that respect.
So you're connecting what the engineering folks do.
Yeah, there's a lot of thought that goes on for a while, and then when it's time to really actually implement it, that's when we get to do our thing.
And you are actually creating what the end users see.
Well, I'm working on a lot of stuff outside of the EE proper site. So we've got products in the pipeline for people, and I'm getting to work on one that I think everybody's really excited about.
You work in an Expert Office, right?
That's right.
Okay. So, and we do have expertoffice.com out there right now.
I worked on that too.
Very nice. Tell us a little bit about what Expert Office is for folks who don't know.
Expert Office is something I think a lot of people were sort of asking for a long time. I think anybody that experiences Experts Exchange and how it works at some point thinks, if they work in a bigger company where there's a lot of knowledge that needs to be passed around, at some point thinks, this would be great for us to have something like this in-house. And I know that several people here at the company have been approached many, many times. Hey, is there a way to get a version of this that we can implement ourselves? So that's exactly what we're doing with Expert Office. It's a lot of looking at everything that Experts Exchange does, cutting it down to the absolute essentials of what you would need to do that in a business environment, and make it a little fun, because the other thing about tools like that is a lot of times you spend all this time and money and you implement this tool and then nobody uses it.
Right. It just sits there on the server somewhere.
Right. So we're looking for ways, sort of almost organic ways, that it will just naturally motivate people to go ahead and use the thing, rather than having some higher up have to tell you need to do this.
Right.
We've already got that on EE, and so we're implementing a sort of streamlined version of that for Expert Office.
Oh, great. And so is this something that you guys are kind of still rolling out, you're working on?
Yeah, we're still adding a lot of features, and the basic version of it there is done. But we're still enhancing it. I think there's a lot more that we can do with it.
Well, we'll probably be talking a lot more about Expert Office in the months to come as that is being developed. But today we are talking a little bit about Google Hangouts. Last week, President Obama hosted a fireside hangout.
Without a fire.
Without a fire. There was literally no fire in
Yes.
in the
He
Roosevelt
pointed
Room,
it out.
which I thought was interesting. The comment that the guy made, because Obama was like, "Well, we don't have a fire today," and the Google the Google host says, "Maybe we can light one up later."
Yeah, I'm waiting for the meme of that to fire off on the internet now. Pair that quote with
one up.
Pair that quote with a certain famous photograph of our president from his early days, and boom, meme city.
Well, this is the fourth time Obama has teamed up with Google for a hangout. This is a follow-up to his State of the Union address, and they did a 40-minute video interview with hand-selected bloggers who asked questions covering issues like drones, patent trolls, gun control, and they even talked about Mark Zuckerberg a little bit.
Yeah, they got into all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, it seemed to be perhaps a broader range of topics than a typical media interview would cover.
It did. With that format, you're going to get little tangents and things that
Right.
people will go off on.
So what were some of your takeaways from the president's hangout?
Well, in a really general sense, if you're a certain age and you've been around long enough to see these things come into,
So you're an old codger, is what you're saying.
I'm an older guy. I'm in my early 40s. So which in a way is a really cool age in terms of technology, because I've really gotten to see the whole big spike. I mean, it's accelerated in the last 20 years to an ridiculous degree.
And you've been in technology that whole time?
Well, I've been at least interested in it the whole time. I mean, I'm probably some of the first generation of people that could take basic programming classes in school. I mean, I got to work on those big steel Commodore computers that they sold to all the schools.
Right.
Those things were built like tanks.
Yeah. I mean, you weren't exactly in the punch card era, but
No. I mean, that's what I mean. Probably like the more public version of it. Once they weren't the size of a room.
Right.
And required, tubes, to keep them powered. So I didn't have a Fairchild or anything, but I did at one point own a Timex Sinclair 1000.
That's
That was my entry into the whole thing, because it was what, $90, $100, and so I pestered my dad until I finally got one.
So this is sort of giving you a perspective on where we're at with something like these Google Hangouts video conferencing.
Yeah, because I've gotten to see the technology go from this new, brave new frontier, and now it's pretty ubiquitous. I mean, and watching the Hangout, I was struck by, well, how cool is this? I mean, there's all these people sitting around there just having a chat with the president, and it's even more immediate and sort of visceral than, like, let's say it was a conference phone call or something,
Yeah.
I mean, there's probably a reason why they never did that.
Well, and it was interesting watching the Hangout, because obviously the White House has done a lot to improve the production values of what they're showing on the president's end.
Yeah, it looked fantastic.
And yet there's still these awkward moments, when they're all making their introductions, and the bloggers are like waving to the president, like, "Hey, buddy."
Yeah, if I was an advisor to the president, I would suggest to him that saying "How are you" is probably not a good idea.
Yes.
Because then you're dealing with the weird pauses and everything, and now you're running the risk of it being that poor correspondent on the TV news who's halfway around the world, and you got to wait 3 minutes for his answer to the question.
There's that little kind of awkward moment when it switches back and forth of who is going to talk, and then
he said how are you to about 3 of them, and one of them answered, and I kept wondering, were the other ones cut off, or did they not answer?
Yeah, I know that they're doing more Google Hangouts with I know that PBS and other media outlets are trying to do that more often, where they can bring in bloggers and other writers and have a conversation about a topic. So I think it's a way where they're trying to create a more casual space for these conversations to be broadcast. Because this is just, even the president's one, which is one of the more polished Hangouts I've seen, is not something that's really broadcast quality.
I was wondering about that myself. I was wondering if in the future, is it going to evolve to something more like that? That would probably be a separate thing.
Right.
But for just the average user, it's already at a state where it's...
Have you ever participated in a Google Hangout?
Once, and it was for a D&D game. Let's get geeky. Yeah, we were assaulting a fortress built into the side of a volcano.
Okay.
And 3 of our players were not in state. So, we needed our dwarf and our thief and our magic user to be there. So.
Okay. So now we all sitting in eating your Cheetos in your basement and all talking.
Yeah. It was pretty great, actually.
Nice.
But then you got to deal with the whole, can you turn, because since we're playing a game, you got to turn it so they can see what's on the board, and then turn it this way because somebody said something funny and you want to see what their face is. And, and I just kept seeing, in my head, I kept thinking, well, how long before they start making, chairs where you've got the screen built into the back? I kept thinking of that scene in Demolition Man. There's a scene where he's having a conference, and he walks in, and it's nothing but chairs with these monitors on there. And as he walks through the room, they're turning to keep their eyes on him. And I'm like, we're going to have that.
Yeah,
it's going to be like that.
You have essentially these little robots with a video of your face.
Yeah, conference rooms will be nothing but a big, long table with a bunch of chairs with monitors on them, and there may not even be a human in there.
Yeah, that's kind of a disturbing thought, but...
Well, they'll be someplace nice.
Right.
They don't have to sit in the conference room.
Right. They can be eating Cheetos in their basement.
You don't have to pay a cleaning staff to go in there and clean the conference room or anything. There'll be no Cheeto crumbs in the conference room.
I actually have done a couple Google Hangouts with my friends, and one of the things that I quite enjoyed is they have all these little hats
Yeah.
and mustaches and things.
Yeah,
that you
we
can,
had a little fun with that too.
yeah, I think like the beginning, the first time we did the Google Hangout, like the first half hour was us just screwing around with all the different
And the sound
helmets.
effects.
The sound effects, yes.
applause and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, but it is definitely. I mean, I've used Skype a number of times for video calls, and then used the Google Hangouts, and I got to say, I'm pretty impressed with how the Google Hangout, recognizes that someone's speaking and automatically switches that video to the main video.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty impressive tool that they've developed.
Yeah, and it's free.
It's free.
I mean, how do you beat that?
Yeah.
I know a lot of people that swore by Skype and still do to a degree, but I mean, once they hit that price point after a couple of people now, I think that pushed a lot of people towards Google Hangouts.
And I think you can have up to like 15 people in a Hangout.
That's
or
the
like that.
part that I think is insane.
Yeah, I mean that's really getting unwieldy if you
Yeah.
got 15 people.
But they've worked it out pretty well. I mean, the UI, such as it is, not really a UI, but I mean the graphic arrangement of all the people at the bottom and all that, it seems to work pretty well.
Yeah. And I think Google has been doing some interesting things to promote it. Obviously, having things like the Fireside Hangout has been big.
Yeah, that helps.
And they've been doing a number of inventive hangouts to draw attention to the product. Earlier this month, they partnered with National Geographic, and they connected explorers from 7 different continents to have a hangout talking about exploring.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, let's get all the top people in a field and put them in a room, quote unquote,
Yeah.
and then let everybody see that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously a brand like National Geographic, that makes total sense for them to be involved with something like that. And for them, as a result of the Hangout, National Geographic, their Google Plus account ended up garnering 150,000 new members, and they had 50 million social impressions across all their social media platforms.
That's pretty amazing.
So, I mean, it's something like that, where you can put all these faces onto a screen having a conversation that, a niche group of people are going to be very fascinated with.
Right.
It's a great opportunity, I think, for brands to engage on that level.
It's perfect for that sort of thing. Now, I'm sure a lot of people still wonder how do you quantify that into, well, what do you get out of that?
Right.
But it's still eyes and ears. And at one point, I think National Geographic was probably a brand name that was in danger of not being spoken very much anymore. But this is the sort of thing that's going to keep it around.
Right. And I think partnering with a company like Google, which very clearly wants to associate themselves with science and exploration and those kinds of things.
Which is great. I love seeing this new push towards emphasizing science and math. And,
right.
Because we've lost the edge, I think, and
Yeah.
I think it's time to get it back.
Yeah. Well, Copernicus was the doodle today on Google. So.
I missed that, really?
Yeah, there's
Go check that out.
a bunch of planets floating around in the Google Doodle today. So.
Copernicus, that just used to be a favorite, not insult of mine or whatever, but it would be like when your friend did something stupid, you're like, yeah, way to go, Copernicus.
Well, speaking of the planets, the next Google Plus Hangout that you might want to check out is on February 22nd. They're going to be hosting a live hangout with astronauts aboard the International Space Station.
That's cool.
Which is pretty stinking sweet.
Right. Do we get to see stuff floating around behind them now?
I would hope so. I mean, anytime you
if it doesn't do that, won't you be disappointed?
absolutely. I mean, the guys gotta so they have to throw some food in the air,
Right.
and like
Someone's got to open a bag of chips
Yes.
and reenact the Simpsons episode,
I think that's part of the bit that's expected. They probably tell them that before they go on a space
Right.
trip. Like you're going to do some videos and you're going to have to like eat food out of a tube
Sure.
through.
You have to
floating
be
there.
floating when you say hi to everybody. And then, maybe turn upside down or
Right.
something so they know.
Right. We're not faking this,
Right, because there will be conspiracy theorists anyway. No matter what they do, people say, yeah, that thing that was floating, I saw, you could see it was CGI'd. I know a shop when I see one.
So anyway, that'll be February 22nd, this Friday. So check that out. And
Wait till we start having Google Hangouts from people that are on a base on the moon or something like that.
that'd be cool.
In fact, Google's probably going to be the company to build the base on.
Right. It
actually.
would probably just to demonstrate their free software.
Google Moon.
Last fall, Experts Exchange hosted the inaugural TEDx San Luis Obispo event. Focused on the theme, The Power of Community, the event featured 14 thought leaders from the business and technology world. one of which was Gopi Kallyil, who is the chief evangelist for Google Social. Gopi spoke on how social media is emerging as a platform for building communities of interest for people across language and geographical boundaries.
I have a question for you. How many organs are there in your body right now? Well, I asked Dr. Neha Sangwan, who spoke earlier about this, and she said, well, it all depends on how we count organs. So I went and asked my most trusted source of information, Miss Google, and Miss Google told me there are 78 organs in the human body. I want to introduce you today to the 79th organ in your body, not created by nature, but created entirely by human beings. This little device right here. Now, does that shock you? Well, since most of you seem to be holding on to one right now, let me introduce you to this 79th organ. It has a skin because you touch it, it responds. It has ears, you speak to it, it seems to understand you. It has a voice, it talks back to you. It has eyes because you can hold it up and it recognizes faces and objects. It has a brain because I know my smartphone is a lot smarter than I am. And it must have a spirit, a mind, some sort of consciousness. Otherwise, why else would we keep this so close to our heart? Sleep with it next to our bedside, and most importantly, spend most of the day with our phone lost deep in prayer. But in all seriousness, there are 7 billion people that today form the global community, and 6 billion out of 7 have access to some sort of a mobile device. This is the most pervasive technology in human history. And what this means is more people have access to cell phones than have access to clean drinking water or electricity. And I had a moment of epiphany about this. And I want to take you on a journey that took place in a small rice farming village in southern India called Chitlanjeri. And that's where I had this thought process. Now, Chitlanjeri is a very soft spot in my heart because it is my home village. And this is where my grandparents grew up as poor rice farmers. And this is where my parents, the pictures at the top, were also raised without access to electricity, running water, or any kind of technology. When I was young, and I would visit Chitlanjeri often, the entire village of 20,000 people had 3 telephones with 2-digit numbers. Imagine the fight for vanity numbers in that village. So back then, I considered myself a child prodigy because I carried the entire phone book for a village of 20,000 people in my head. And I still do, 31, 32, and 33. 6 months ago, I was back in the village with my parents and my siblings for a ceremony in the village temple. And as I was walking around these paddy fields, I noticed that most people in the village had access to a cell phone. And it struck me then that anybody in this village could pull out this little organ that has miraculously sprouted at the end of her fingertips, punch in 15 numbers, and be instantly having a conversation with any of you. Or be able to share a slice of their life socially and through pictures and video with any of you. All of a sudden, we are at this stage where geography and location is not a barrier at all. Whether we live in a mega city or whether we live in a tiny rural community, 6 billion of us are interconnected. This is unprecedented in human history. But the question is, what are we doing with this capability? How are we building community? What kind of social good is coming about as a result of this level of interconnectedness between 6 billion human beings? And to showcase that, I'm going to share the stories of 3 communities around the world. The first community lives in Soy, Kenya. And I want to tell you the story of Zach Mater, who's a farmer in Soy, Kenya. And now, can we roll the video, Zach Mater, please?
Not long ago, I planted a crop of potatoes. Then suddenly they started dying one after the other. Checked out the books and they didn't tell me much. So I went and I did the search. Potato diseases. One of the websites told me that ants could be the problem. It said sprinkle wood ash over the plants. Then after a few days, the ants disappeared. I got excited about it. I realized that not everybody can be able to access what I was able to access. I thought that I need to have an internet that my grandmother can use. And so I thought about a notice board, a simple wooden notice board. When I get information on my phone, I'm able to post the information on the. When people have the knowledge, they can find solutions.
So Zach Mater says when people have access to knowledge, they find solutions to their problems. But the genius of Zach is how he has taken a 2-year-old technology and a 2,000-year-old technology called paper and put it together to help his community connect to knowledge that is available as part of our collective wisdom on the internet. And the genius of Zach is that how he's able to tap into useful knowledge that is available in the world through the internet, through his cell phone, and when he finds something useful, he makes it available to his community in Soy, Kenya, through what he calls an internet even my grandmother can use, a simple wooden notice board. That is the genius of Zach, and that's how this community is plugged into the global community. The second story I want to tell you about, I'm going to take you to Ontario, Canada, and Scotts Valley, California. What is happening around the world is these communities are beginning to form on social media based on what people are interested in. People who don't know each other are finding each other based on a shared interest and are able to form a community. And to talk about this particular community, I want to introduce you to somebody called John Butterell, who's on the left. He lives in Ontario, Canada. Now, John is a professional photographer. And as a professional photographer, one of the things that he organizes is photo walks. He picks a nature setting, goes on a walk, and other amateur photographers join him on this walk, and they take beautiful pictures and exchange information with each other about aperture settings, about lighting, about camera equipment, etc. If you're interested in photography, and to participate in a photo walk, you need 3 things. You need the right camera equipment, you need to be physically present in that location with the professional photographer, and you need to be able to walk. So one day, John had this idea. He thought, what if I connect my cell phone to my camera and plug it into social media? Because these days, social media has the capability for people to see each other through video. Products like Google Plus Hangouts, for example. And this way, he said, I can allow people from other parts of the world to join me in a virtual photo walk without having to be there. So he conducted a small experiment one day. And that was the day Corey Fisk joined the Hangout, and that's her picture on your right. Corey Fisk lives in Scotts Valley, California, and she has an interest in photography. But she has one problem. The last time Corey Fisk walked was 10 years ago. She suffers from multiple sclerosis, and for 10 years, her life has been on that bed, looking out through the window of her house. And she jumped into a virtual photo walk with John Butterell. Let me ask John to narrate the rest of the story. Can we roll the John Butterell video, please?
One day, I was out taking pictures, and I thought, how cool would it be to attach a phone to your camera and hang out with 5, 10 people, and they would see exactly what I was seeing through the viewfinder of my camera.
Gorgeous.
It was amazing. The next day, Corey Fisk came into the Hangout.
I love photography, and I have been living with MS 10 years, and this is my world. There's nothing more to my world than that.
I just said, tomorrow, I'll take you for a walk. I'm going to walk closer to that old tree over there.
Down a little,
Okay.
a little more, right there. Lovely.
For a few brief minutes, she wasn't going to be in that bed. She was going to experience her own momentary escape.
See you later.
She was on a virtual photo walk. The next day, we posted it. And photographers all over the world jumped on board.
Utah Lake.
Oh, yes, we have a sea turtle.
Look at this.
Oh my goodness.
And you guys see what I'm seeing at the moment.
After that first photo walk, Corey Fisk said, "For the first time in my life, I felt I was no longer trapped in my body on that bed." And as you could see in that video, photographers from all over the world jumped in, and this community started growing, and they started taking people like Corey Fisk and now many others in a similar situation on this incredible journey through Italy, Hawaii, Africa. That is the power of community forming around social media and creating social good. The third community I want to introduce you has a 2,006-year-old history, spiritual and philosophical community that has historically been confined to a small portion of the world. And to meet this community, let's go to Cape Town, South Africa, and Dharamsala, India. At Google, I work on the social media product, and one of the capabilities we built into the product is the ability for people to talk to each other face-to-face, because that is an integral part of how human beings communicate with each other. Even if technology is available, we want to be able to meet face-to-face. In September, I set an intention. How about if I use this capability to ask His Holiness the Dalai Lama to use social media to have a conversation with his good friend, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and have a dialogue around peace and compassion, and allow other followers of the Dalai Lama's teachings to join that discussion or listen in on to this discussion. And sometimes when you write these kind of crazy intentions down on paper, the universe mystically aligns and things start manifesting. Because 4 days after I wrote this idea on paper, an international geopolitical furor erupted, and I had a call from somebody in South Africa, Jonathan Ratinoff. He called me at around 1:30 in the morning, and he said, "Gopi, I know we haven't met. I'm so sorry to call you so late at night. But we just had a call from the Desmond Tutu Peace Center. Desmond Tutu's 80th birthday celebrations are coming up, and they've invited His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, to deliver a lecture on peace and compassion." Unfortunately, the South Africa government has not granted him a visa. And they were wondering, and I was also wondering, is there some technology by which you might be able to address this situation? And apparently the words that came out of my mouth, when I asked him how long do we have to do it, he said 3 days, 3 days to pull this off. And we had never actually even launched the technology at that point. So apparently the words that came out of my mouth were, "Well, Jonathan, around here, the impossible we do in a day or two. The miracles take a little longer, like 3 days." So 60 hours after I got that call, the Dalai Lama sat in front of a computer in his living room in Dharamsala and used social media. Archbishop Desmond Tutu did the same thing at the University of Cape West in Cape Town, South Africa. And this is what the world witnessed and participated in. Can we roll the Dalai Lama video?
I've already told them about you.
I heard.
And while it is a real pity that His Holiness cannot be here, we are so grateful for the world of technology that has come to us and that we can have this conversation.
Now this I really very much enjoy. You see, although physically long distance, but I can see your face.
I just wanted to find out from you, why does the Chinese government fear you?
Some Chinese officials describe me as a demon. I immediately respond, yes, I have owned.
Do you know what is significant about that particular exchange that took place? The Dalai Lama is part of a 2,600-year-old tradition that started with Gautama Buddha. The previous 13 Dalai Lamas had almost never traveled outside Tibet, and the wisdom was pretty much held in that community in a landlocked society and country. And here was the 14th Dalai Lama able to take his wisdom and his message and able to share it with a global community using social media as the vehicle. Today, the Dalai Lama has 12 million followers on social media. The Sangha has gone global. So what I've done with these stories is actually taken you on a journey that took you to 4 different communities. The community in Chittagong in India, which all of a sudden finds itself connected through cell phone to 6 billion people. Zach Mater in Soy, Kenya, who's able to tap into the wisdom of the global community and bring it to his small rice farming community. A group of photographers who are forming a virtual community on on social media, and allowing on social media and allowing people trapped in difficult physical situations to journey out into the world, and a 2,000-year-old tradition now finding a certain presence on social media. And even though they are now physically scattered, metaphysically, they find connection with each other through social media, the followers of the Dalai Lama's teachings. But what is most significant, profound to me in all of these stories is a very simple truth. Human beings thrive and survive on community. It is communities that provide the platform, a fertile ground for creating social good. That is our essential humanity. That is what being human is all about. And we are now witnessing the next chapter in that evolution. What we are now doing is using the power of social media to create communities of a very different nature that was not possible before, and in that process, creating a vehicle for unleashing social good. So as you leave TEDx today and wander off, I want you to ponder about a couple of questions. And those questions are, how are you going to use social media? How are you going to build community? How are you going to create social good? Thank you.
Thanks to Gopi and all the TEDx San Luis Obispo speakers who came out last fall. And hey, Dave, thanks for joining us in the podcast today.
Thanks for having me today, Gary. It was fun.
If you would like to subscribe to this podcast for free, you can do so on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Stitcher. For more technology news, be sure to visit our blog at blog.experts-exchange.com. That's also where you can find all the video presentations from TEDx San Luis Obispo. I'm Gary.
I'm Dave.
And hey, thanks for asking.